I was raised as a woman in the Southern Baptist tradition that I was taken to as a child. I was raised that I should not focus on me. That was selfish. So for me to say I have wounds and I need healing felt selfish to begin with, which is just, well, that's just bizarre, right?
I think for me, the journey towards weird has been, well, I may as well suffer for who I actually am and what actually matters to me, as opposed to suffering for something disingenuine or trying to be someone else. Because you're going to suffer either way. Like, the wound is going to come, but so's the wonder.
I think that when we are in touch with our own weird, that we are honoring our divinity, our nature of love, and that we're also then able to, in other words, we're mirroring for ourselves. We're birthing for ourselves this divinity we've been given, and then we're able to mirror for others their own. So like with my students, because I accept myself and appreciate and have self-compassion for me, which was a many decades journey to get to that for me, I can mirror that for my students.
Oh my gosh, friends, welcome back to The Healer with 1,000 Faces. I am so excited that in this episode, I get to share with you one of my all-time favorite people, a precious friend and mentor. Carmen Acevedo Butcher is a teacher, a translator, a trauma survivor transformed, and as I said, a true friend. She was recently named the Dean of Faculty at the Center for Action and Contemplation, founded by Father Richard Rohr, where I just happen to have my day job. And as a medievalist and a scholar who has translated so many mystics, she's not a dry academic, but is instead a teacher who shows us constantly how practical contemplative practice can contribute to our healing today. As a translator, she's always taking ancient wisdom and applying it to exactly the moment that we find ourselves in. She's a fellow lover of Jungian psychology, mythology, and a co-conspirator in learning about the healer's journey. Now, Carmen does focus on the Christian mystics, but she brings wisdom in from the world over. For those of you who might be a little bit allergic to Christianity or the language of God, please do remember this is an entirely different religion than the Christianity currently being expressed in mainstream culture, politics, or even the pews of most churches today. That'll be pretty apparent as you listen, but when Carmen talks about God or words that might trigger you, I encourage you to let those words get a little bit more weird, because Carmen especially explores the power in words and stories. She's always inviting us to reconsider the mystery, the mysticism, and the meaning of the words we think we already know. As Albus Dumbledore says, words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. And in this episode, you'll definitely hear two dyslexic doctors get super nerdy about words. But we'll also talk about being trauma survivors, about finding our own wisdom and our wise guides, and how Carmen especially has found both the wisdom and the work that is hers to share. Carmen has been such a good source of encouragement to me as I've been working out this idea of the healer with 1,000 faces. Back when I was first exploring this idea that our wounds lead us to our wandering, then our wondering, then our wisdom and our work, Carmen had said to me, yes, Michael, but they also lead us to our weird. And this was such a good callback because, first of all, I thought, gosh, it's so true. And how wonderful to break out of the scripts handed to us so that we can just live our own wonderful weird in the world. But what was also great was that it was a callback to the moment that Carmen and I became friends, which happened, of all places, on social media. I had posted one of my favorite quotes about living our own weird, and Carmen reached out to talk to me about the word weird. You know, the word weird in the English language is defined as very strange or bizarre. But Carmen reminded me that the word weird in English, W-E-I-R-D, is connected to the word weird in Old English, W-Y-R-D, which shows up in stories like Beowulf. And Beowulf, by the way, is a pretty great epic with heroes and monsters and dragons, and you should 100% check it out. But the important part here is that the word weird, W-Y-R-D, refers to fate or destiny or karma, the life path that we are all called to walk, that's unique to each and every one of us. And that is connected to our weird. In other words, your unique and authentic life path will lead you to living out your weird, W-E-I-R-D, your own uniqueness, the part of you that makes you one of a kind, the part of you that gets to break free from everything that everyone told you you were supposed to be and lets you be who you truly are. And that should set you up for what you're about to hear with Carmen and I. So let's drop right in there with Carmen and start out wondering how we can each live our own unique life and let our wounds lead us to our weird. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm so glad that I get to share Carmen with you. There we go. This is something that, Dr. B and I had in common. So we open every day CAC. As you know, you join.
Yeah.
CAC does a short sit. And so Dr. B used to say to me, she said, look, some people like to be spontaneous. I like to prepare. Mm-hmm. And I said, Dr. B, I lead a sit every Friday. It's 5 minutes long. I write it out and I practice it 5 times before Friday morning. And so she laughed and she recognized that we were cut from the same cloth.
We are cut. You and I, Michael, I totally think you're my brother, like by another mother or something, because I literally or father or however we want to work it, because I definitely and relate to Dr. B with that too. Absolutely.
Do you think with you and I, do you think it's the dyslexia or do you think it's just a personal wiring?
I think it's that. I think, and it's also the way this Jungian life talks about it.
Yeah.
There's a kind of alchemy that happens when your wounds talk with each other in a kind of a mutually beneficial way.
Yeah.
And also the wonder does.
Yeah.
That is the same wonder about, look at that weird tree. I'm the same way.
It's so true.
I'm absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
If people could see our text feed, it's pictures of ducks and bees and all the wonderful things. Well, this is why I'm so glad that you agreed to have this conversation with me. When I think about someone I know who really has let their wounds and their experiences of wonder turn into wisdom, I'd be hard pressed to think of someone who embodies that more for me than you do. So thank you so much for being willing to talk to me about The Healer with 1,000 Faces. I'm super stoked.
I'm thrilled.
Oh my gosh. We have to start this conversation by talking about how we first met.
Yes.
So I have a quote that I hold very near and dear to my heart. It's one of my all-time favorite things, and I throw it up online every so often, and I think I may have posted it. It might be right around the time that we're recording this, because I very often post it on the anniversary of my brother's passing, because it speaks to me so deeply of who he was as a person at his best. And so I had put this quote online, and you had commented on it, but we have to start with the quote, and then we'll talk about it. So Alan Watts says this, one of my favorite penned passages ever. I have always done things in my own way, which is at once the way that comes naturally to me, that is honest, sincere, genuine, and unforced, but also perverse, although you must remember that this word means per, through, and verse, poetry, out of the way and wayward, which is surely towards the way, and that to be queer, to follow your own weird, is wholeheartedly to accept your karma or fate or destiny, and thus be odd in the service of God, in whose service, as the Anglican Book of Common Prayer declares, is perfect freedom. Oh my gosh. I love this so much. The idea of following your own weird and being odd in the eyes of God. It's just, oh my gosh. It speaks to me.
Love it.
In my bones, you know? Mm-hmm. So good, right?
I absolutely love every word of that. I remember when you posted it, something in me leapt up.
Oh, well, it was so great because I posted it, and you and I think we're friends on social media. We have common friends, but we hadn't really connected yet. And so you left a comment on my Facebook page, and immediately I knew that we were going to be friends. But do you remember what you commented on it?
Well, I do remember thinking, I actually posted it and then took it off and then posted it again, you know, before like I clicked to send it because I thought, is this too nerdy? And then I thought, no. This is someone I've seen roll down a sand dune. This is somebody who I've seen, you know, post about Jung, and I think I can go all in nerdy.
Oh, yeah.
And so because I have this upwelling in me about the word weird that I so love, and I know I posted something about my love of the word weird. And also, I love Alan Watts and his wisdom.
Yep.
So I remember I went all in on loving the word weird. And Beowulf. I think I mentioned Beowulf, right?
That's right. You did also mention Beowulf. Wow. And you were just like ringing all the greatest hits for me. Like I said, I knew immediately. I was like, this person and I are going to be great friends.
I just can't even. Because the thing is, the first time I met the word weird was in Beowulf in graduate school. And the word weird is a bit like watching, you know, if you're watching like a Marvel movie or something, sometimes somebody has a superpower and it works and sometimes it doesn't. The word weird works that way in Beowulf. Sometimes it can be just fate and it's going to happen regardless. But sometimes if a warrior comes up with enough courage, God can be convinced, or weird can be convinced, whatever it is, can be convinced to maybe spare someone. And so weird is just this dominant force of Beowulf. And it's so and it's mysterious. I'm not making fun of it. I mean, it's this mysterious force of Beowulf. And you come out of it going, I love weird. I just love it. Yeah.
It's so well because you think of weird as being out of the ordinary, which again is great. Like I think one of the things that we'll get to is the gift of being out of the ordinary and being who you are, right? Remember that old adage, like you were born an original, don't die a copy. It's so true.
Yes.
But I didn't know about the connection of weird to fate or destiny or karma. Like Watts says it, and I think he's tipping his hand to a knowledge of the word that I didn't have. So you broke down the meaning of the word weird for me, and it blew my mind. Can you tell for everyone listening, what does weird mean?
Okay, so weird literally at its core meaning is the word to turn. And actually it's related to the word perverse or verse because the verse part means to turn. Also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I always think of T.S. Eliot's line, you know, at the still turning point of the world, there the dance is. But it's that thing of turning, of being alive. And in another related word in the Old English, the word for to become is related to weird. Wow. So it really is at the heart of being alive, weird. In other words, weird actually, if you get down to the bedrock level, means to be alive is to be weird. Do you see what I'm saying?
That's great.
Like, it's not extraordinary, except it is extraordinary to be alive. Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. It's also interesting, too, because I think about how many great spiritual teachings and also how many mythological heroes are called with this thing that asks them to turn, right? Even when Jesus shows up, his first, I think, sermon is repent, but the repent word just means turn. Or it talks about Moses walking past the burning bush and he said, I will look and see this thing. And the things that turn us, Jung talks about thinking about God as anything that crosses his willful path for better or worse and redirects the course of his destiny. But I love the notion of the turning, Not the least of which because I live in Albuquerque where the driving is crazy, and you never just know when someone's going to just turn in front of you.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
I mean, that's a really good example because we're talking about the ordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to forget the ordinary. It's all about the ordinary, really. Yeah.
Well, and and we're going to get into that because I feel like it's the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yes.
I think I love that when you and I had that first connection, you felt safe and excited to sort of drop the etymology of the word weird and where it showed up in Beowulf with me. Because right away I thought, my God, here is, and I hope this lands well, here's a delightfully weird person just like me, right? What a great way to be. Do you think, and then we'll get into some more fun details. What do you think the gift is in letting ourselves be weird?
Well, I have to say that before I even answer that, one of the reasons I think I felt so comfortable with you is that I'd also seen you had posted about your grief. And I know we're going to get into that in a minute, but you had been so vulnerable about that. You were just this delightful mix of literally, again, rolling down the sand dune. And I remember somebody commented on your page, how much sand did you have in your ears, after that. Yeah. And then you would be posting about your brother, your mother, and, the bardo. I mean, you and Jung, and you had this wonderful sense of humor. And it was just this wonderful mix that I related to greatly. Okay, so ask me your question again, because I just wanted to say that, though, because I don't, generally speaking, post about the etymologies of weird or Beowulf on just anybody's page. What I'm trying to say is that really, I guess, because really and truly, that is my heart. Do you know? I mean, that may sound like a nerd thing and it's all in the head, but that knowledge of weird that I shared with you was actually my heart. Isn't that funny to talk about? Yeah. But yeah. So what was your question again?
I love that you leaned into your weird by talking about weird. That's just so great. And I think my question is, and we'll get deeper into this in a second, but just like the short answer, what do you think the gift is of getting to be weird? Like I love how you live your life. I love who you are. I love how you celebrate beauty and don't turn away from your own wounds. And I also love how you love your students, right? How you work with these young people. Yeah. And I imagine you want them to find and celebrate their weird. What's the gift in really being in touch with our weird?
I think that when we are in touch with our own weird, that we are honoring the self that Jesus really models the way for. And we're honoring our divinity, our nature of love, and that we're also then able to, in other words, we're mirroring for ourselves. We're birthing for ourselves this divinity we've been given, and then we're able to mirror for others their own. So like with my students, because I accept myself and appreciate and have self-compassion for me, which was a many decades journey to get to that for me. Yeah, I can mirror that for my students. How are you doing? You drinking your water? Taking care of yourself. And also when they have an interest, I can be super interested in it because they're interested. I just think I think we are all made to be weird. Yeah. Isn't that the secret?
It's so true. I love one of my favorite passages from Carl Jung, and I won't get it word for word, but anyone listening can look it up and find it immediately. He talks about, he's talking to Christian folks, and he says, if you're thinking about the imitation of Christ, he said, are we called to try to copy our lives and be a carbon copy of Christ, or are we called to live our lives as originally as he lived his? Okay. And that's what he suggests is, the literal quote is, we're not called to ape his stigmata. We are called to live our lives as originally as he lived his. And I think that's what's beautiful is when you see someone who is so delightfully living out of their own weird, it inspires you to do the same.
Okay, so see, I love that because I never felt like I fit in. I know this is ordinary for an adolescent, but for me, it just kept going on.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that now, because I think if you look at industrialism, you have a factory. What does it do? It makes the same thing all day long. And there's a purpose of that, right? But I think there is this torque or this pressure in empire to become an object.
Yeah.
And God, let's just say it. We're saying it without saying it, but God is weird.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because God doesn't fit my preconceived notion of something.
Yeah.
God is surprising and weird. And if I am made in God's image, so am I. And so are you. So is everyone, in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Well, and so I knew immediately when you and I connected that we would be friends. And now, since then, we have become great friends. We work together at the Center for Action and Contemplation, but more than that, we get to just be in the joy of collaborative dialogue and mutual learning. And so this podcast explores the idea of the healer with 1,000 faces. And when I was dreaming it up, I shared the idea with you that, we do the work of our personal healing. And when we do our own personal healing work, right? I do mine. Mine is different than yours. Yours is different than the next person's. We find our unique medicine, the medicine that we need. And then that becomes the medicine that we also, since we have it, that becomes the medicine that is ours to give to the world. And I remember sharing that with you, and you said, actually, Michael, we don't just find the medicine, we become the medicine. And I remember that was such a good, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to think about that for a long time. I'm still thinking about it. And then I shared with you my thoughts, Origen's notion of the health bestowing wounds, that our wounds, if we work with them, actually become the thing that heals us, right?
Right.
And this idea that our wounds set us out on our wandering, and they shape the path that our life takes. They set us out on our wondering, and they shape the questions that are uniquely ours to ask and answer. Our wound leads us to our unique wisdom, and our wound shows us our unique work to do in the world. And of course, it eventually leads us to wonder with a capital W, and the wonder that, like the wound, has been there guiding us all along. And I said, what do you think? And you said, it's great, but don't forget. And you took me back to that first conversation. You said, our wounds also lead us to our weird. And that was so great. And I said, okay, we absolutely have to talk about that. So how do you think it is that our wounds in particular lead us to our weird?
First of all, that's just such a beautiful sentence with so many W's in it. I mean, that's just, that is, and it's so wise though. I mean, all of it. I can tell you've been reflecting on this for some time, Michael. So I would say, how do our wounds lead to our weird? One way is that wounds are a form of initiation, or at least they have been, into the human condition for me. And, you have in Buddhism, in Hinduism, the concept of dukkha. And, that it's a bumpy ride. Like literally, I think it's from a cart's poorly fitting axle hole. And so it literally, the word means a bumpy ride. And
oh my God,
I didn't get that from Christianity growing up, from the evangelical, churches that I was in. But I wish I had, because it took me some time to get there. But it does send us, our wounds, on a journey for healing. That for me has been for wholeness, for realizing that we are whole already too, in some mysterious way, even as we are also broken in ways. And so the other part of it that I love is the fact that once we are realizing that we're on a kind of a journey, we realize that we really can't do it alone. So it's a little bit like Lord of the Rings, and we need our companions to go with us. Because, I mean, if you think about it, you have Gandalf, and they say, well, why can't you just take the ring? And he's like, no, I might be tempted, And so you need these hobbits with hairy feet who like to eat toast, who come together and go together. So that to me sums up everything. It definitely is an initiation, and it's a kind of a healing journey that we go on together. There's that aspect to it.
Well, I like that. I love that you invoked The Lord of the Rings, which will never, get anything but enthusiastic participation from me on that. And the Fellowship of the Ring is such a great example because you have all of these characters who are all heroes in their own right. They all have a particular strength. They all have, or several, and particular weaknesses. Yep. And they all sort of have to play their part to play, right? Frodo has to carry the ring.
Yes.
Sam has to support Frodo. Gandalf has to be the wise advisor. Aragorn has to get to Gondor, and so on and so forth. I was actually just having this conversation the other night where one of the things I love is that every character grows and has an arc and has a wound to work out and some healing to do and some heroism to show up for. But it's all different.
Yes.
It's all different. And it only works out because everyone does their own unique part.
I mean, their community is like an entire, it's like Elena Sixou. It makes a third body. Do you know their community? You have all of them individually, and then you have their community as another body.
Yeah.
And I just think to be aware we're wounded is a gift.
Yeah.
Because there's no way, life blows a hole through everyone.
Yeah.
I've never met a single person who has not experienced a wound or wounds. Sometimes as soon as we arrive as this miracle on earth, sometimes a big one at a certain point, sometimes many small ones over many decades, but no wound is small. And so I just think, I think a lot about, too, because you and I share a love of Carl Jung and Anne Ulanov. And one of the things that I appreciate about both of them, because I was raised as a woman in the Southern Baptist tradition that I was taken to as a child, I was raised that I should not focus on me. That was selfish. So for me to say, I need healing, I have wounds and I need healing, felt selfish to begin with, which is just, that's just bizarre, right? And then when I studied Carl Jung and Anne Ulanov, they're telling me that I have a kind of a gentle, strong moral imperative to heal because that actually contributes to the larger body.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, okay, I can get behind that. That makes sense, and it also made sense to me. And we have that in the Christian tradition of the body of Christ. Which includes everyone, really. Yeah. Especially people at the margins. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think about Jung. Jung talks about, so one, I love that you mentioned dukkha, right, which often gets translated as suffering. And I was always told when I was young that the Buddhists were taught that all life is suffering, which is not what the Buddhists teach. They teach that suffering is avoidable. We don't get a life without it.
Right.
And then our good friend, and there's the whole teaching, like you get suffering from wanting what you don't have and not wanting what you do have, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But our good friend Mirabai Starr talks about double dukkha, which is suffering added to suffering. In other words, don't make it worse.
Right.
And Jung talks about necessary suffering. He says, you're going to suffer, but suffer for the right things.
Right.
And I feel like, I think for me, the journey towards weird has been, well, I may as well suffer for who I actually am and what actually matters to me.
Right.
As opposed to suffering for something disingenuine or trying to be someone else. Because you're going to suffer either way.
Right.
Like the wound is going to come, but so's the wonder.
Right.
Interesting. And so you talk about too, I appreciate what you said there too, about growing up in a way where you were taught that advocating for yourself would be selfish.
Yep.
And it's so interesting to pause on that for a moment because there's so many good spiritual teachings that are organized to put the ego in check, right? We talk about the hero's journey. A big part of the hero's journey sometimes is for the hero to be humbled.
Yes.
But for someone who's been told their whole life, that they don't matter or that they are not allowed to put themselves forward or that they're selfish,
Right.
that medicine for someone else would actually be toxic for you.
Thank you. I mean, I can't even say how toxic. This is another thing that Anne Ulanov discusses at some length, that in general, historically, we have defined pride from the dominant masculine perspective. And so we've always been told to be selfless, to be to make oneself less than, to try to lower oneself. And I would hear that preached in church, and I would think, how can I go lower? How can I be made lower? And because already I was there, I just was, wow. I don't know what else to say about that. And she says instead that for women historically, the sin of, quote, pride would be something more like refusing to embrace the God-given divinity and authority that we have, and instead giving it away to the church, to a husband, a friend, somebody else.
Yeah.
And I found that so powerful, so helpful for me personally, that she named that.
Oof. Wow.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were talking about, Mirabai, who's one of our favorite people on planet Earth, and how she was saying, don't do that double dukkha, suffer that twice. And I think it's interesting because Mirabai has translated, of course, Julian of Norwich so beautifully.
Yeah.
And Julian of Norwich talks about wounds. I mean, Julian of Norwich asks for 3 wounds. She prays to have 3 wounds. And in the Middle English, it's the wound of contrition, which means to rub with. In other words, humility. But it literally, the core of the word is like to kind of rub away what's not essential. But humility. She wanted the wound of contrition or humility. And then she also wanted the wound of kind compassion. In other words, to suffer with others. And then she wanted the wound of longing. So I love the fact, like you said a minute ago, you wanted to be your own authentic weird. You wanted to have the wounds of authenticity.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Julianne was praying for so long ago in the 14th century. She was having the same prayer as you, Michael. She was saying, please give me the wound of humility, of kind compassion for others, and of longing for you. Because it takes me back to how Jung said at the end of his life, and we talked about this recently, when you see him interviewed, and he says, and the interviewer from BBC says, so do you believe in God? And I'm on the edge of my seat, because I've read this before, but I've never heard him do it. And he goes, do I believe in God? And the interviewer goes, yeah, do you believe in God? He goes, well, I did believe in God growing up, sure, yeah. But now, the interviewer says, he says, now? He says, well, now I can't really say I believe in God. I know God. I know God. And to me, that's what you're talking about when you say you want to have this authenticity and all the wounds that come with that. Because knowing God is no messing about with. I mean, it's an awesome space.
I think of Job in the end of the book of Job, putting his hand over his mouth and say, I spoke about things I didn't know, but now my eyes have seen.
Yes.
And so I put my hand over my mouth and I say nothing.
That gives me goosebumps every time I read that passage, because Job rails against God.
Yeah.
And I so relate to that, right?
Yeah.
And then God actually shows up.
Yeah.
And Job does that. Yes.
Well, and I think there's just to reflect on a few things you said, I love the notion of, Julian there, the wound of humility and contrition, that rubbing, like the scouring pad that scrapes off everything that's not authentic and not real.
Right.
And I think for a lot of us, we think to be humble is to be crushed. And what you're describing is to be freed from everything that's not authentic of
Right.
who and what we actually are, which is beautiful. And I think about the word humble too. So many people think the word humble means low, coming from earth, and people think it's to be pushed down. In reality, it's just to be grounded. And what a gift to be grounded in who we are authentically. And I think to know God is to know ourselves. Like what a cool. Oh my gosh! All right, so there's a million questions I want to ask you. So clearly, anyone who's listening is immediately aware that you love words.
Yes.
We've mentioned that you are a translator. You've translated quite a bit. What are some of your favorite texts that you've translated?
Well, it all started with Alfred of Inisham, who was a 10th century Benedictine monk in England. And he had some sermons that had never been translated before on the Gospel of John. And they're written in poetic prose. So think James Finley, Jim writing back in the 900s, literally, and in Old English. And so that was really beautiful and fun. And then I did some translating of medieval women mystics, so lots of different languages. And then moved on to doing some Augustine pieces for an anthology and some Dionysius from the 5th century. And then the ones that really communed with my heart most recently are The Cloud of Unknowing by Anonymous in the 14th century, and also Brother Lawrence. And that was, of course, The Clouds in Middle English, and then Brother Lawrence in modern French, early modern French, and that was the 17th century. So all good stuff, all classic prayer.
It's so funny. So you and I had that exchange on social media about the word weird. And just a few days later, I mean, literally within a week, I was hanging out with our already mentioned good friend, Mirabai Starr. And I told her about that exchange. And I said, Carmen seems amazing. And she said, oh, she's amazing. She just said all the good things about you and said, you want to get to know her. She's fantastic. She's one of my favorite people. And then she said, hang on. And she left the room and she came back with a stack of your translations because she had double. She said, I have extra of these to give away. And so she gave me, you think your Cloud and your Brother Lawrence and a few other things. It was great. And immediately I knew I was impressed when you were using gender neutral pronouns for the divine, when you started referring to God as they, them instead of he, him. And I was like, okay, this is someone who I want to get to know. And I have a very specific question for you, but first I have to ask, you're such a good listener and you are so deeply compassionate and affirming in the way that you listen and mirror back when you conversate. I have to wonder, is that part of, I know it's just part of who you are, but is that part of what you learned from being a translator, listening so deeply?
Oh gosh, well, I can just pass away now, because if I would ever hope someone would think that, that would be the thing, is to be known as a deep listener. Because I guess part of it is that I value so much being deeply listened to. But I guess, yes, part of it is from, but which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? You know, yes. I love deeply listening, because what I've discovered is that if I deeply listen to anything, it can be I'm standing in line and somebody in front of me is being irritating, you know, because, and I mean, maybe sometimes that's me, but sometimes it's the person in front of me. And if I deeply listen to that person, I come away being amazed by their humanity. Literally, in some way, in some shape or fashion. And so, I would have to definitely say, to be a translator is to be someone who reads very intensely. And what is deeply listening, but the oral form of reading deeply. You see what I'm saying? They're all, to me, I have a hard time separating them out. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Well, and I think one of the things you and I have talked about, I love, Origen, my great mystic, talks about each person writing the books of the soul and the page of their heart. And I love encountering each and every person as their own unique scripture or their own unique myth in the world, right? Everyone's an epic in their own way and worthy of being listened to and learned from.
Yes. That's
but Carmen,
the thing.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask, like, speaking of wanting to listen and learn from everyone who's an epic, this idea that our wounds lead us to our wisdom that is uniquely ours to offer. I have to ask you, anyone listening knows you're a lover of words. We know now you're a translator. You're a PhD. You're a scholar of medieval thought, as I recall.
Yeah.
A wordsmith, a poet, multi-published author. And I nearly wept the first time you shared about being dyslexic because, as you know, I'm also dyslexic, was not diagnosed till in my 30s, and it made so many things make sense, including struggling so much in high school. So I'm curious if it's fair to consider dyslexia a wound. I want to ask, well, first I'm tempted to ask, how did you accomplish all this with dyslexia? But I'd almost rather ask, how did dyslexia help you accomplish all this, becoming such a lover of words and an author and a translator and a deep listener?
Well, I have to say that, first of all, when I found out that you're dyslexic, I have gained a new appreciation of my own dyslexia. So that's how kind of community works, right? I mean, I was already on the path of appreciating, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, when you share different things, it makes me... the way Jim Finley says, those of us who are contemplatives, we need to hang out together, to keep each other company. So I've so appreciated that. And I would say that dyslexia helped me to accomplish all this because in order to, like you said, it was in high school that you were having difficulties reading. And for me, it started... I'm sure it started even sooner than that for you, but for me, I never found reading easy. And as the pieces got more complex and one could say boring, because some of it was stuff I wasn't interested in, but it wasn't just that. It was just, as the pieces got more complex, it got to even harder because the words would move, the D's and the B's would swap the S's and the C's. And literally, I felt dumb. And I thought, what's wrong with me? And mine wasn't diagnosed until my late 40s. And I was helping a student, and he was saying, "You're so patient with me. I've just been diagnosed with dyslexia." And I was like, all the bells went off. Yeah. Because I was helping him with something I have always learned to cope with on my own throughout my life. And so I was just being the patient way I am with myself. And that was when I started reading about it. But I would definitely say that one of the ways I learned to cope over time, was that because I didn't want to be left behind. And that's a terrible phrase to use, I know. But what I mean is I didn't want to miss out on, because I knew my brain worked fine in the sense of it understood stuff, but it just worked different. And so I would look up word etymologies or their histories. And once I learned that words had stories and movement and roots, they had all of a sudden weight to them. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like enthusiasm is within, and theos, God. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is cool to know. That's great. And when you hear that somebody's attracted to someone. Okay, so let's just look at this word for a minute. I mean, my first year students find this ultra interesting. So like I used to say to students, and sometimes still do, how is attraction or being attracted to someone similar to tractor? They're like, yeah, sure. But really, at means toward and tract means to draw or to pull. Just like a tractor pulls things. And once you see that sort of thing, like attention means to stretch towards, once you start seeing those kinds of things, words stop being abstract things used by empire for you to have hoops to jump through on the SAT in order to try to get the few resources to get into a college and funds. You know, it stops being a zero-sum game, and words become like people. Like they become friends. And once I could do that, words started being my friends. And so I looked at them so up close Yeah, I
love
deeply
that so
listen
much.
to him. Yeah.
I think you most got me to fall in love with respecting words when you told me about respect, which is one of my favorites. You remember what you told me about respect?
Oh, I do, because it's one of my favorite things, because it's one way that I teach not stereotyping and moving into being the anti-racist. So again, or it can also mean intensely. So in other words, in other words, do it often. And then spect is like my spectacles, or a spectacle, or being a spectator literally means to look, to see.
Yeah.
So if I have respect for someone, let's say I've been married to someone since 1990, I am going to respect them and to look again at my husband, not assume that I know who this is in front of me just because we've been together for decades. Right? And the same with myself, the same with God, the same with all the mysteries of my life. I'm going to look again at everyone.
I love that. And if it's to turn and look again, then I wonder if we can connect it to weird, which you said has that root of to turn, right?
Very good.
And so in respecting, we let things be weird.
Yes.
And new every time we see them. Oh, I love that so much.
And can we add a little bit more weirdness to this?
Please.
Guess who are cousins in the world of etymology? The words dyslexia and Lectio Divina.
Oh my God.
Because it's the same leg ancient root, which means to collect or gather words.
Yeah.
Only with dyslexia, it means difficulties with words.
Yeah.
But with Lectio, it means sacred words. Okay, so I just want to say, because for me, Lectio Divina has been one of the antidotes or balms or medicine for my dyslexia.
Well, and you and I have talked about this elsewhere. It's one of the greatest gifts. So Lectio Divina, one of the greatest practices of the contemplative Christian tradition, slow, deep, thoughtful, sacred reading. And when you're dyslexic, you don't have the option to read any other way.
Right.
Like you have to read slow and thoughtfully, or you can't read at all.
Right. And repetitively, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, do you read things just once? I mean, I have to reread, right?
No.
Yes.
I have to read with a pen because the pen helps me keep my focus.
Yes.
I will underline and reread. And I have to go. I have to chew on it. I have to chew on it to get it. I can't. There's no speed reading in my world.
Okay, so I have to add, because one of the things you asked me a minute ago, and what you just said reminded me, your wise point there, because literally, because to read as a dyslexic, I have to reread. What I learned from doing that is that when you do reread, you see new things the second, third, and fourth, and fifth time. When you're translating, you definitely benefit from that. Because where if you come into a text and you translate what you see the first time through or the second time through, it's not the same as what you see the 14th or the 15th or the 20th time through.
Well, that makes sense. I think about even just stories I love. We mentioned The Lord of the Rings. I love the Harry Potter series, or texts that I love, Viktor Frankl's writing. These are things that I go back and I read over and over and over again, and every time it's different.
Yep.
Every time it's different.
Yeah.
It's there's always something new that leaps off the page.
It's so true. Repetition. As you know, our friend Jim Finley says, repetition is not redundant when done meaningfully like that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, so I thinking about, you mentioned Jim, I'm thinking about being dyslexic. So I was always taught I was brilliant but lazy. And I have been this is heavy. It's not fun, but like spanked to the point of not being able to stand up with a math book because I wouldn't do my math homework. But I wouldn't do my math homework because I didn't have the language to explain it. The numbers moved. I couldn't do it.
Yes.
You should have seen me in my 30s. What ended up happening was a friend of mine became a learning specialist, and I was talking about how impossible it is for me to find spelling errors in my doctoral dissertation. I'm finishing my PhD, going, I just can't find the spelling errors because I can't see them. And she said, that sounds dyslexic. And I know, no, you know what it means, like when the letters move and the numbers move. And she goes, yeah, that's dyslexic. And I said, no, it's like trying to remember a phone number. I can't remember a phone number because I can't hold it in my... So we did this, and finally she's like, look, I'm going to give you a questionnaire. You're going to fill it out. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm dyslexic. Everything made sense.
Yes.
But I didn't, unfortunately, for all the good I can say about, parts of my childhood and my deep love of my sister who's still with us, like I did not grow up in a home where there was safety to figure that out. Right. And I think one of the things that you and I, and we already mentioned Jim Finley and Dennis, who's been on this pod as well, like all share in common is having a scary childhood. Is that
Yes.
safe to say?
Mm-hmm.
And I am curious to the degree that you're willing to share. For some folks, it's this great heroic call to set out in the world and like put their dent in the planet. And for some of us, it's more like an early stage shamanic dismemberment early in our lives, where we have to deal with not having a safe home or it not being as safe as it could. And I do think that wound does set us out on our wandering. What feels safe to tell us about growing up that way and how it's affected your healing journey?
I really like how you worded all that, because it's very thoughtful and also brings in that very helpful, gentle, specific language of psychology, psychoanalyst, language, which I find super reassuring because it creates a safe container, a wise container. So for me, I was raised as the oldest of four. So I came out thinking, how can I protect everyone? Yeah. And there was much to protect from, because my father had a disorder of some sort that not all disorders have violence, but his did. And it was a kind of violence that increased as he got, into midlife and beyond. And so it wasn't like a period of my life where I experienced violence, which is horrific enough and wounding also, but it was an ongoing wounding and an ongoing, as a psychiatrist told me once, for complex post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the criteria are that you have to have had the threats of death or possibilities of death, and that definitely was a part of my upbringing. And when you said shamanic, this dismemberment, I remember thinking, when I was being told in church to be selfless, I literally was thinking, okay, because I was the conscientious kid who heard one time, Mirabai and I have talked about this, she says she heard it too once, that I heard a preacher once say, at least in my background, it was a preacher who said, pray without ceasing. And I, as a kid, thought, I want that terribly much, right? And so I was already reading the Bible. I was memorizing verses that my kind mother told me about. And I was doing all the things. And I was still being told, if you're having difficulty, you need to be selfless. You're not selfless enough. And I remember thinking, how can I be selfless when I don't have a self? This is dangerous theology, because especially if someone has experienced abuse. And, we also have intergenerational trauma. And trauma, etymology of it is wound. Etymology of wound is possibly a Germanic ancient word that means violence experienced in battle. And lately, whenever I see the word violence, I think of Father John Deere, who uses nonviolence as kind of a synonym for love, right? So really, our wounds are part of the violence of the system, the empire that we're in. But for me, I was always trying to be the perfect good kid. And I learned that no matter what I did, it was never good enough, because my father was sick, was unhealthy. And And that is just one of the things that I live with to this day. I have healed. I have a very kind husband, and I'm so grateful for his love. And, friends, my mother's kind. But there are this kind of wounds that even as we healed, we are also healing, And so it's this wonderful mix of we're all in this together because you're aware that you are also very human. You are very in need of staying grounded. And my father passed on 5 years ago or so. And when he did, I remember a therapist asked me once, "What did you feel? Relief?" And I said, "Yes, I felt relief."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I grew up with a theology that I'm also the oldest of three, not the oldest of four. And, have the disproportionate sense of responsibility that comes with that. And I was given a theology that God was good and wanted to bless us. So if you were suffering, you were either doing something wrong or just not working hard enough. So this was internalized messaging for me. If you are in pain, it's your fault. And the way to get out is to work harder. And, I had things with my mom, who's a marvelous woman, but unfortunately also rageaholic, that there was no amount of work I was going to do that was ever going to fix that. And to have internalized the message that it was my fault is so profoundly damning to a young soul. And thank God for overwhelming breakthroughs of, the experience of unconditional love. I think my life has been a dance between constant mystical experience of unconditional love and then constant self-sabotaging efforts to earn it and prove that I'm worthy of it. What I appreciate, Carmen, is the ways that it's so apparent that you put the type of love out into the world that you felt the need for, I'm guessing. Does that make sense? Does that feel like it's right?
That's so weird because I remember even thinking when I was growing up, I am going to try to love others the way I wish I could love myself.
Yeah.
And the way I wish my father loved me. Because my mother was kind, but she was a bit powerless, in the family dynamic. And yes, that's absolutely. And so I still had that huge piece to go because I had, what do you call it in psychology? Because you're my psychology expert. I mean, I've read it, but you actually, when you introject, is that?
Introjection's the opposite of projection.
Yeah, and I had literally introjected my father's self-loathing. And so I... through counseling some years ago, the first time I went to counseling, I literally had to deal with all of this introjected self-loathing, and I had to recognize it. And it was in translating Brother Lawrence that I began to find the gold in my shadow of oh my gosh, I can have I can be my own friend.
Yeah.
People would never have known that about me because I really was trying to be kind. I mean, I have all the usual human things of not getting it right all the time. But I mean, I was in the main trying to be a kind person, right? I don't think people would ever have guessed how much self-loathing I was living with on a day-to-day basis. And part of that also at that time period led me to have depression. And also suicidal ideations, which I do not have now for some time. But what I mean is it is so painful. So I have such sympathy for people experiencing this on any level.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I've this is another deep connection of our friendship. I've walked through those things myself. I am... So one of the things to talk about in these conversations is that idea that our wounds lead us to our wisdom. But I also think they lead us to our wise guides. Yeah. The folks that show up to help. And so we introject these, I'm with you. There's an accuser that sounds very much like a parent of mine that lives, unfortunately rent-free in my head.
Right.
But what's been a gift has been also introjecting other voices of love.
Yes.
who now can be the advocate internally. And I think about how for some of us, we are just so fortunate that in our woundedness, the wise guides find us and help us heal ourselves. I would love to, if you would share one of my favorite stories. When I think about you sort of like in your own sort of journey, the wise guide or the wizard that finds you for me will always be Mother Bushbeck. Would you share a little bit about that story of just how she came into your life and how she was a healing presence?
Yeah, when you describe her back to me, it makes me emotional just listening to you. So thank you for asking about her. So Sophie Bushbeck. So Sophie, her first name, Wisdom. Sophie Bushbeck was someone I met through a professor. When I got a Rotary Club scholarship to study in Germany, right when I graduated from college, I was going to go there, and you know how sometimes inferiority manifests itself as superiority, like I'm going to do this on my own. I can do this. And when I landed there, they had lost all my papers. I didn't have a place to stay. And I'm putting coins in a telephone to call my mother saying, please, can you get my professor's name and get that name of that woman he knows in Heidelberg? Because I didn't know. And so I called up Sophie Bushbeck. I was homeless. And my German wasn't that good at that point because we didn't have a language lab at my school. So I just could read it, but I couldn't speak it. So I'm totally flying blind and without any instruments, And I called her up and I fumbled around in my German and I said, can I please come see you? Because I don't have a place to stay. And she's like, schön, dass du da bist. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful that you're here. So this 79-year-old widow, her husband had been a Lutheran minister. He was a contemporary of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Friedrich. Wow. He had been in a Russian prison camp. He was a chaplain during World War II. And she had 8 children, and they became refugees. They fled Russian soldiers. She said, Carmen, this is all in German, but she said, Carmen, you don't know what it's like until you have 8 children, you don't have a place to stay, and you have to tell your children, tomorrow, we have to put this food away, the rest of it, because we need it for tomorrow. And some of her children didn't grow as tall as they could have because of this. And she took me into her family. I came to know, my German, the reason that I know German to this day is because all the adults in her family would say, oh, your German is hervorragend. And all the children, it's beautiful. Your German is beautiful. Because you know how adults do to each other. And all the little Bushbeck children would laugh at me and say, you sound like, in German, they would say, you sound like you speak German with a hot potato in your mouth because of my Southern accent and all the mistakes I would make. And so Mother Bushbeck, I was done with Christianity at this point. Not only I was done with it because I had seen my mother and my brother and sisters and I had experienced physical violence and abuse for a long time. And the sermons in our churches were preaching, wives, submit to your husbands. They never preached, and husbands, treat your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. So it was a really bad thing. And I was done. I wasn't done intellectually. I was done in my heart. I was hemorrhaging on the inside. And I could not, it wasn't healthy for me at that time to be reading the Bible. I just couldn't. It was like I was allergic to it. And so it's interesting because I also at the, Mother Bushbeck just met me where I was. I never even told her my story. She didn't need to know. She just somehow knew all of me. And at the time also, I was suffering from anorexia, and I didn't have language for that either. And the only time I even really quite understood what was happening was some of the people at Heidelberg University I was in classes with were like, you're too skinny. I was like, no, I'm not. Then I started thinking, am I? And started developing awareness around, yes, I have an issue here. And she would feed me. Every Friday, she would cook me roast chicken. She didn't even like roast chicken, but she said she heard Americans did. And, she's a widow. She's living alone, even though she was taking care of a lot of lonely people in the neighborhood. I used to say to her, me included, I had a few friends, students, but I had old soul wounds, and I needed an old soul, And she asked me to read the Apocrypha to her in German. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so first of all, Michael, I just have to tell you, where I come from in the South, in the evangelical church, the Apocrypha, not only had I never heard of it, but it was heretical.
I was going to say, it sounds like witchcraft. I love it.
I mean, you know me, I looked up the etymology of the word. Okay, so I was like, but here's how it came into my world. She's like, oh, you've got to read Tobit. It's one of my favorite books. And so I'm reading to her, and there's this little cute dog in it, and there's a fish, and there's magic. And she's saying to me, and I'm reading it to her in German.
Yeah.
I can take it in German. And she says to me, isn't it wonderful how they pray before everything? And because she was living for me the life of the gospel and of love, God really sneakily got me right back in. I mean gently. I mean, not sneakily. What I mean by that is mysteriously.
Yeah.
And I found my way back in. Yeah.
It's amazing to me. There's that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I know somebody might listen and say, well, not me. And so I'm not saying it's, happens for everyone all the time, but it is a gift when the right person shows up to be a healing presence in your life and can love you in a way that you've been lacking. The Joseph Campbell's whole hero journey thing talks about the wise guide showing up. And I always think of Mother Bushbeck as the wizard in your life. And I especially have to, now that you said she had you reading the Apocrypha, she's got you reading some forbidden, sacred, ancient text. Goodness gracious. That's so, I don't know. This is like a totally random free association here, but I am very deeply struck by what you said about old soul wounds and how you needed an old soul. Could you say another minute about that, if you would?
Yeah, because here's the thing. She never tried to help me. I would have been resistant to that in a very elemental way, not intellectually, but in a very embodied way. Instead, what did she do? She had me, it was really like wax on, wax off of the Karate Kid. She had me clean her rugs. She had me scrub her steps, because Germans have clean steps in her neighborhood. She had me help her cook. She fed me. When they had Christmas, she had me there with her 2 daughters who were not married, and we drank wine. She had real candles on her tree. She took me to the Gemüsefrau, the vegetable woman, and we bought vegetables together. She and I went for walks together along Philosophenweg. You can't make this up. Along Philosopher's Way, above the Neckar River, and the castle. And she would do things like, she would say, she modeled for me gratitude. She took care of the lonely people in her neighborhood who were alone. But she would do things like every Christmas for the mother's house, in other words, the nuns who took her and her children in when her husband was gone for 5 years. She would make pastries and send to them. And so she would do things like, help me with this. And I'm like, what, huh? And so I'm rolling things, making these pastries. And she would say, this is all in German. She would say, now this, you have to be able to, and she'd just laugh. There was so much joy. It just always reminds me of Dr. B saying, make joy. Joy is a practice. And she would say, you want to be able to hold the pastry up over the newspaper and be able to read the newspaper through the pastry. It has to be that thin. So there were these times of wonder when we were hiking, and she was 79 and I was 22, and she could hike. I mean, she could go. And so she made me part of her life.
Yeah.
And and one day she saw me cleaning the edges of my shirt before I washed them in her, because like she let me wash clothes in her washing machine, and she saw me cleaning, the sleeves of your shirt when it gets that kind of like, brownness on the inside, and I was scrubbing them a bit, and she was like, "Oh, sehr praktisch, very practical." So she really affirmed my selfhood, and I could not have been more afraid of my shadow at that time. And she affirmed me at every point. She loved me. I told her at the end of my stay there, I got quite emotional because we'd never talked about this. We'd just lived together and been best friends. And I said, because she had me, at first I called her Z. And one day she had said, "Please call me Du," which is, the informal you. And I said, "Mutti." And she said, "Please call me Mutti Buschbeck," like my children do. So I said, "Mutti Buschbeck." And this is all in German. I said, "I don't know how to thank you. I've never told you about my life, but you have saved my life. And I want to thank you for that." And she said, "Ah, Carmen," she said, "God gave me a little mission, and I am just so glad I could carry it out." She said, "And don't you forget, it has been so good for me to have you here as my friend."
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
And you think about the healing work that she did in your life to help you heal, to let you then be a healing presence for others. That's so, oh my gosh. I don't want to abuse your time here, so we're not going to go too much longer, but I have a few lightning round questions before we finish up.
Happy to.
One, I love that she, took you on walks and that you long before we had The Body Keeps the Score to tell us that trauma lives in our body, right? And how much we need embodiment. I love just how natural and embodied that was. And one of the things I appreciate about you as well, in that quote that started our conversation, Watts talks about doing what's natural to you. And so what I have appreciated is that you have such depth of spiritual practice, and you can connect it back to all these ancient practices and all these ancient traditions, but you also sort of have just done what's natural, right? You learned about Lectio Divina and then did more of it, but you were already reading that way because it was natural. We've talked about this. You walk in nature because it feels naturally right to do it, even though we know that walking is one of the most universally celebrated spiritual practices. Origen talks about sort of different types of wisdom when we go through different seasons, and he, says we construct a lot of spiritual beliefs and ethics and all of that, but then we kind of blow that up at a certain point. We move into what he calls the physique, which is the natural. Doing at a certain point, there's actually a growth in letting go of all the shoulds and leaning into what's natural. It's a lot of words to ask a question. Is there anything I can ask you to share with us about sort of the natural way that you do practice and also do practice in nature?
Yeah, I have just developed my awareness over time and then informed it. Like you said it very well with those words. Because, for example, I've always identified with Mary Oliver, how she said that she went for walks because she wanted to get out of the house. And I literally would go out of doors to escape the house. And I feel free there. Yeah. And then that developed into something else as I developed an awareness of, wow, what's happening here? But it did start sort of as a natural response. And you said it so well. And then I would say that with Lectio Divina, yes, it came because my mother said memorize verses, and then to memorize a verse, you really sit with it. And then it started being walking with Bible verses on 3x5 cards and just really living with them. But I would say that I really love, one of the best books I've ever read on prayer is The Cloud of Unknowing. There's a reason that it has existed for so long, because he says in it, experiment. He says to his 24-year-old spiritual companion or directee, he says, okay, so here's a couple of strategies that have worked for me. And I love his strategies. I mean, they're ones that, are taught across all wisdom and faith traditions, really, if you'll start looking. But then he says to her, and if these work for you, great. And if they don't, then I'm sure you'll come up with ones that you can then teach to me. And he adds, as you invest the time in experimenting and trying your practice, God will become, you'll see, he says, God will become your teacher. And then you'll have much to teach me. And so for me, one of the things that I pray is, what should I do? And I mean that even about the practices that I do. Sometimes I'm like, I'll touch base and go, because for me, a practice can also just be the word help. I mean, sometimes we go through a hard time. And sometimes within this stillness that we've created through practice over the decades, all we need to do is just sort of let up the help. Like, hey, I'm here. There's a difficult, because during the pandemic, a member of my family had a very severe health issue. And I still always chant, because one of the things that I've always loved to do is sing. And so I make up chants. I think, though, that we think that there's going to be a practice that will solve everything, because, we grow up in the school system that's binary. And if you think about it, we are schooled to take multiple choice tests. Multiple choice tests, I've made them before to try to see if they're any good. They're problematic, okay? But that's what our brains have been geared to. We're not geared to experiment with organic mystery. But why can't we? Really and truly. So I just love that the Cloud of Unknowings Anonymous really does teach experiment.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I think about this is my second to last question. I think about the notion of like the alchemist in the laboratory. I love the idea of experimenting. Yes. And again, part of finding our weird, not being afraid to lean into what's natural.
Yes.
In how we do spiritual practice, how we do self-care. And also, listening for the wise guides and the wizards that cross our paths. And I love, again, experimenting in the laboratory, blowing some things up. I'm thinking about Merlin in the Sword in the Stone. And I know you love words, and I know we share, already tipped the hat to a love of the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Yes. I am thinking about the wise guides that show up in our life, and I'm thinking about the word wizard, right? Because the word wizard it's a bit like the word shaman. Shaman is a Siberian word that refers to a very, very particular type of folk healer in a very particular region of the world. And then Mircea Eliade was a scholar who studied that and said, we can see similar patterns across the world. And then he made it a sort of a general term, and now shaman can mean a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's a word that not only has a broad application, but it's captured the contemporary imagination. And wizard is the same way. A wizard was a type of wise advisor that you can trace back centuries, and they did engage in, they were knowledgeable in a lot of different fields, including magic and alchemy and other things, but they were there with sorcerers and mages and all types of other things. And then when Tolkien wrote about wizards in Lord of the Rings, wizard became a term that got more and more popular and now refers to all these other types of advisors and magicians and sorcerers out there. And then the Harry Potter series made wizard, an even more broad and accessible term. What do you think it is about the word wizard that captures the contemporary imagination right now?
Gosh, that's such a good question. Well, I have to first think of, what does the word wizard mean? Its root is W-E-I-D. It's ancient. It means to see. So also wisdom, same root, wizard and wisdom. So I think there is an inherent connection between wizards and wisdom. And if you look at Gandalf, who's one of my favorites, he's funny. Okay, he's humble.
Yeah.
When he does big magic, he gets tired. He has to go off and rest. It's very like Jesus, in that way. But he'll be saying also things like, I was talking aloud to myself, a habit of the old. They choose the wisest person present to speak to.
My favorite lines in the entire book.
And then the next moment he's saying to the orcs, I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so who doesn't want to be friends with that person? And I also think of the wizard within. So the wizard of the self. And I think when Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, he had just been through the 40 million dead war, World War I. And he had seen such horrific things. When he came back from that war, his entire platoon or group died. He got injured with trench fever. And so he knew about violence. And I think the connection is we have these polycrises, we have fascism everywhere, including in the United States. And we need wisdom. We need everyone to develop, access, enjoy, honor, and live out their interior wizard.
Wow.
That's what I think.
Gosh, you're not wrong. And I appreciate, oh, wow, that's good. You're not wrong. I keep saying we need to make wisdom great again.
Yeah.
God, we need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking about Merlin, who aged backwards or was moving backwards in time in some versions of the story, or Lao Tzu, who was, they say, born with a beard, born as an old man. And yet through the entirety of his career, Lao Tzu had this playful, childlike nature. And I love what you said when you're like, I was an old soul. I had old soul wounds. I needed an old soul to meet me there. I feel like most of the people who really, you exemplify this really, really well. Most of the people who've brought that wizard energy into my life feel both young and old at the same time. There's like a wisdom that feels like it's the Ancient of Days, and yet there's a childlike whimsy and a sparkle in the eye and a playfulness that you don't think could coexist in one person. And yet that humor and that playfulness really is a sign of wisdom, isn't it? Has that been true for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so for me, I know when I'm having difficulty, when my sense of humor kind of dissipates. Do you know, or my playfulness? I know that I need to feed myself. I need to read a Mary Oliver poem, like maybe Mysteries, Yes, or something. I need to open up my app on my phone and maybe write something, like journal to one of my prompts. Because, for example, one of my favorites, and Maggie Smith died, I think it was last year, Professor McGonagall, all right? So, okay, so she's leading the defense of Hogwarts.
Yeah.
You couldn't pick a more serious time, could you?
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
And all the students, the young people, are crowded around her. And Phileas says to her, you do know we can't keep out you-know-who indefinitely. And Professor McGonagall says, that doesn't mean we can't delay him. And his name is Voldemort. Phileas, you might as well use it. And then she lifts up her wand and says, Pure totem locomotor. And then all the statues and the suits of armor, come to life, and they start falling and marching out. And then she turns to those around her and says, with glee, I've always wanted to use that spell.
That's a great scene.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that you hope, because the thing is, Dr. B talked about this a lot. Yeah. In the times of great danger, the slaves had the hush arbors, and they would come together and sing, and they would come together and be together, and they would find joy in this, as she called it, crisis contemplation. So I do hope that we can all remember that delight in the middle of the difficulties.
It's so well said. I heard Dr. B, Dr. Barbara Holmes, and Dr. Walter Fluker have a conversation at one point, and they shifted something for me, because they talked about joy as resistance to empire, and a joy that's not a naivete, but a joy that will not let itself be snuffed out by everything that would oppress us. There's another quote I love from Alan Watts, who says that I think he's talking about the joy of the divine, and he says people think that a joy in the divine when there's so much wrong in the world is like a Nero who fiddles while Rome burns. But he says there's so much suffering in the world that if there wasn't joy at the heart of it, we'd all be damned. And I find that to be true, the joy that's not naivete, my God.
I like that.
What a gift.
Wait, I like how you say, though, it's the joy that's not naivete. That, to me, that's the key. It's that wise joy.
Oof. Okay, last question. One of the things I love about being your friend is that you send me postcards all the time, and you send me great mail, and lots of things with ducks, because I love ducks. Yes. And bees, and I love bees. The very first one you ever sent me, we were talking about that verse that says pray without ceasing, and I said, Origen said the only way we can pray without ceasing is we realize all life is a conversation with the divine, and we were talking about these little pithy prayers that we use in our meditation, and you sent me a postcard, and I love it. It had this quote on it, and it's from one of the Desert Fathers, and I love the Desert Fathers and Mothers. It's so great. This is what it says. Abba Macarius was asked, how should we pray? The old man said, you don't need long-windedness. Just reach out to love and say, love as you wish and as you know me, grant me self-compassion. Or just love, help. I love that so much. So my last question, Carmen, we're going to go out on this one. How is this the essential prayer of taking the healer's journey?
First of all, I just have to say that I have to preface this. And I have to say, one of the things I love the most about you, Michael, is that you're brilliant and you love ducks. I mean, I really love that those coexist in you with such alacrity and joy. So how do I answer this? I would say that the healer who is traveling needs to travel light. And so the reason this is a prayer that I love is because just saying, grant me self-compassion is a mouthful if you really sit with it. Grant me self-compassion. How can I be kind to myself today is something I have to come back to all the time. Because my default is set to being self-critical. I mean, even with all the years of healing.
Yeah.
And so I have to use that default, right, as fuel for my returning to self-compassion. Yeah. So this thing of love help is just me expressing my intentions. So all the people I love, you have Anonymous's cloud of unknowing. What does he say is the most important part of any prayer? Your intention. He says longing is enough. Just that loving look at God. Longing is a prayer. So I used to think that to pray, I had to come up with all these words in a certain magical or best like A+ form, and that would be the prayer. But what I learned from studying all these wonderful contemplatives who are now dead but still alive is that they're always saying, if you're longing, you're praying. Your longing is your praying. And so if I'm in a situation and after years and years of practicing so many practices, has built up this sort of experience and place where God and I dialogue or rest together, I just say, help me. And there we are. We're back to that point of being with God. And that's what Brother Lawrence says, of being aware that I'm always with God. Because Brother Lawrence says, you just need to return as often as you can throughout the day, and you can have these brief conversations with God. And he says, you'd be surprised what people say in these brief conversations. By that, I think he means sometimes we're upset. I really think we don't talk about this enough. But one of the prayers we can have when we're talking with God is, I don't understand. I hurt. Please help me. I'm mad. Along with, I love you. Please help me. This tree is beautiful. Thank you for it. I can't believe I get to walk on planet Earth. But human nature is all of these things. And it doesn't take long, because that's what Anonymous says in The Cloud of Unknowing, he says, we think that to pray contemplatively takes a long time. He says the exact word atom. He says it takes less time than an atom is the size of an atom. It's very,
Wow.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed this, Michael? We over complexify everything. I'm speaking, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but.
No, it's true.
Carmen.
It's so true.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Same.
And the thing is, that's our small ego trying to get everything in order. And really, we have to let go. And so I love that prayer, the Desert Father's prayer, because it sums everything up.
Yeah. Well, and I love, I'll say this and wrap it up. My great favorite spiritual principle from any tradition everywhere is this teaching that comes out of the Desert Fathers and Mothers. It's this notion of apatheia, which sounds like apathy, but it's not. It's not caring about what doesn't matter so we can care about what does. And when I live between the inner accuser and the worthiness games that try to trip me up, and the moments of beauty and wonder that break in to tell me that I am loved, it's that sort of letting go of being perfect and being worthy to just care about being loved and loving well, I think for me at least.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That was well said.
Oh, thank you. It's the joy of being in such good conversation. Thank you for being one of the wizards in my life. I really, really, really appreciate getting to be your friend and getting to learn from you, and then getting to have conversations like this where we get to share some of your wisdom with everyone who's listening.
Oh, Michael,
this has been so rich.
I have loved it so much. Can I share one brief poem?
Yeah.
Because
Oh my
this
God,
sums
please.
up the wonder for me that you talk about so much. Because the way you've put these ideas in dialogue with each other, I just adore. And this is a Mary Oliver poem. And this is what I turn to sometimes, many poems in addition to other Lectio Divina like scripture, to knit my soul together, right? Mysteries, yes, by Mary Oliver. Truly, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. How grass can be nourishing in the mouths of the lambs. How rivers and stones are forever in allegiance with gravity, while we ourselves dream of rising. How two hands touch and the bonds will never be broken. How people come from delight or the scars of damage to the comfort of a poem. Let me keep my distance always from those who think they have the answers. Let me keep company always with those who say, look, and laugh in astonishment and bow their heads. I just love that.
Oh, I love it so much. Oh my God.
Thank you, Michael.
It's so good.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
I love you. I appreciate you. You're a joy.
Same. I have to tell you, I also pulled a Mary Oliver poem, and I've said this before. Her poem that reminds me of you is, do you know her poem Instructions for Living a Life?
I love that poem.
It's so short. This reminds me of you always, and all it says is instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. So
I
great.
love that.
Oh, you're the best, Carmen. Thank you, thank you.
Michael, thank you. I enjoyed it more than I can say.
Oh, so good. Hey friends, again, thank you so much for listening to The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I had so much fun talking to Carmen. I learned so much from this conversation, as I always do. And I found, as I was coming to a close, I was curious how Carmen, as a woman who was wounded so deeply by the Christian tradition, was able to turn around and find wisdom in its ancient origins, in the weird parts of it, in the heretical parts of it, in the witchy parts of it. So, as you might have guessed, Carmen will return. We did record another conversation in which I asked her this question and she shared the answer with me. And that will be coming at the end of the season. In the interim, you can learn more about Carmen in all the places. Just Google Carmen Acevedo Butcher. You can find her at the Center for Action and Contemplation on Instagram. And gosh, in so many great books that she's written and translated. We're so grateful for her. And hey, we're so grateful for you for listening in on this conversation. Big thanks to my buddy Ryan Keller, who produced this episode. And all of you, if you want to help the podcast out, as always, you can rate us, you can review us, and above all, you can share us with your friends. Friends, we've got so many more conversations in the vault, and I'm so excited to share them with you. Till then, my question for you is, how can you live out your weird? How can you be odd in the service of God and your fellow humans in a unique way that is only yours to live? Thanks a bunch. We appreciate you, and we'll be back soon.